Today's guest is Michael Pink. He's the CEO of SmartPM. Michael, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's great. I see you're fixing a watch. Is that a fancy Apple Watch?
It's not an Apple Watch. It's a fitness watch. I have recently purchased to start to monitor my health a little bit better, and it's prodding me to do more. We have a contest at the company of who can, there's about 20 people involved, and we all put in $100, and everybody has to work out 6 times a week under certain parameters, and we have to show proof. So I bought it.
Got it. AI is the boss, right?
Yes, yeah. It's actually been good. I was actually talking about it on a video the other day. It was, it's very much, you don't think about buying these, or you generally are like, at least I was for a while, was like, I don't want to buy this thing because then I'm going to know what's up, and I don't want to maybe know what's up. But now I can't stop looking at it and getting better. So I love it.
Good positive feedback. Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
it's
looking at
negative feedback for positive way.
got it. Well, I mean, looking at your background, you got a initial consulting background, at the major, the KPMGs, the Deloittes, and being a founder on the technology side. So, it's only fitting that you're going all in on tech.
Well, yeah, and data. That's my sort of bread and butter, is looking at data and using it to my advantage. So I might as well be monitoring my health data. And it does tell me a story when I look at it, so it's useful.
Sure. I mean, with all those consulting gigs you had, was that kind of your focus on the data side?
Yeah, generally my line of work was in construction. It was getting involved in projects that had problems. Usually it was the problem, circled around financial, but there was a lot more to the story of understanding, well, why is this project late and over budget? Um, what's happened over time, and what can we do with that information? Sometimes it was to support, arguments at the end of the job of who owes the money. But sometimes we also got involved midstream to help them right the ship. And a lot of times we did, some upfront controls work and analytics work on an ongoing basis to help understand performance for what it was. But yeah, I wasn't sitting on the site looking at what was going on, nor did I live the job like many of the people did. So I was at the behest of the information that I could get my hands on.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like there's probably some interesting stories behind that. Give me some examples of stories, and you don't have to lay out specific names, but size of company, issue, possible problems, and how it worked out.
Yeah. Well, I would say big portion of the work was helping big companies deal with overruns. And usually that was after the fact. It was like, okay, the money's been spent. When a contractor's hired by an owner, they have a contract. And then say it's 100, 200 million. Yeah, we worked on $1 billion projects. Sometimes we worked on $50 million projects, but when they agree to do something, the contractor is going to build something for, we'll call it $500 million. The owner is going to pay them $500 million, whether the contractor has spent 550 or not. That's how the payment application works, and there is the ability to add change orders, but there's an approval process for that to increase the contract. But usually, what would happen is at the end of the day, the contractor spent more money than planned, and they wanted to be paid for that because they have pretty low profit margins to begin with. Um, and if they didn't get paid for that, they lost money on the job, right? They didn't make a profit, they lost money. And what would happen is we'd either get hired by the contractor to help them build a case to support the request, or we get hired by an owner going, why is this my fault? And I don't think I caused this problem that they're telling me I caused, because they were building me something and I was just showing up to meetings and answering questions. So they would come up with key issues, and usually they were completely incorrect, both sides of what really happened. That's where I came in. I looked at the data, went back to the beginning of the job, studied the plan, how they executed against the plan, figured out what issues drove success or failure on the job, what the decisions were made along the way. Ultimately, reviewed the contracts as well to determine, in these cases, this is an owner caused issue or a contractor caused issue. And it wasn't just one thing, it was usually 20 or 30 issues that drove this problem. And I had to kind of ferret out to the people
Yeah.
involved over, the entire job. So that's one thing that we did a lot of. Company, I was on a project down in Brazil. They felt as though this project was not going to be the $3.5 billion project. It was going to be much more and take much longer. And they wanted to know for sure. So I had to hop in, look at productivity and performance across all the trades, across the entire $1 billion project that consisted of 5 industrial facilities, and really understand how they were moving crews, how they were installing material, at what productivity rate, and what that would mean for the short and long term. Give them a date that they were headed to and a price that they were headed to with accuracy, and then a mitigation strategy and a price for that as well. Um, you know, give them some guidance on what you can learn from your data. Because usually when there's patterns in that data that you didn't have when you came up with the estimate. Now that you've got all the teams here and you're installing things and materials are coming to the site, you can see what is going to happen over time if they keep going the way that they're going. And that's where we would come up with, here's where you're at if you change nothing. Here's where you're at if you start adding resources. Here's some of the challenge on the fabrication side that you need to get over. And if you do all these things, you'll end up on this date and it'll cost you that much. So those are the kinds of things that I would do. But again, it was all about jumping into something, not just asking people and saying, well, what do you think? It was more like, what does the data tell me? Because the data is the most trustful thing I can get my hands on that would enable me to do that job.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, when things are just initially planned out, there's a lot of things that are unknown. But it sounds like you were brought in later in the game when the costs are all coming in and stuff like that. But it sounds like someone like yourself, coming in early, setting these systems up or tracking this stuff early seems to be a key factor here.
It is, but it's not. It's interesting. That was what was most confusing to me as a consultant. I was also an industrial engineer, so process improvement was my thing. I was coming in late in the game to improve the process in some cases, but to ferret out the details in others after the problem. And I always was like, why aren't they calling us up on the beginning of the job, right? And it's interesting because they don't. No matter how many times this happens, that's not their knee jerk response is to get that analyst guy up in here up front and let's just do this the right way. It's always sort of like, well, that job sucked. Let's move on to the next and hope it works out better. But that was really what positioned me to leave consulting, actually, because it became very clear to me that you know they're not going to hire expensive humans to do this because it is very specialized and it takes a lot of time and it's very monotonous and there's not too many of those people that could do it as well as others. So I thought technology needed to be brought to the equation to
Okay.
enable people to digest that information with a machine instead of a human, and let the human take that information and move forward with it.
Sure. Did you have a technology background before you started the company?
I went to Georgia Tech. Uh, so naturally, you sort of are interested in technology. It's an engineering school. I was more interested in business processes, but yeah, technology, computers. I grew up in the time where internet became a thing, and I had my own computer, and I like to work on my computer. So, I thought I liked that kind of stuff. Um, I wouldn't say I'm like our CTO in terms of technology. He's got like every bit of technology you could possibly ever want and understands it thoroughly. And I'm sort of, technology's moved faster than I have in this time.
Yeah, for sure. So what was the yeah, I mean, I kind of get it, but what was the initial sort of need you saw with the technology? What did the early versions look like in the early customers?
Yeah, so there was first of all, like, there was a data set in construction that I really, anytime I got involved in a project, I was like, get me that data. If you can give me that data, I can learn this job thoroughly, and that was the schedule data. There's a process in construction where they create a schedule, a plan using what's called CPM technology. CPM, critical path method scheduling, is usually a requirement in the contract to be managing the job using a scheduling application that allows you to put all the things that need to happen and assign an order to them through logic. It was a data set that was readily available. Usually, and that was usually where I said, okay, forget about what everybody thinks happened. I want to go look at that data just to wrap my head around the way that this project was initially planned and how it was executed against that plan and what changed along the way for what reasons. That was to me the gold. If I can get my hands on that, and you can lock me in a room for a couple months, I could dig through it and come out on the other end knowing usually a lot more about the project than most of the people who lived it. So that to me was where I said, okay, if everybody could do this, everybody can be doing this in real time, what I know how to do. Um, and if the system was able to put the information into terms that people can communicate over, like I have to do as a consultant, like I have to drill into the data and then I have to produce, a presentation in terms of charts and graphs and discuss what it's telling me and what that means for the future of the job. If I can, take the specialization out of the equation of what to do with that data to analyze it properly and then produce analytics that can be communicated and in line with the pain points that I've seen looking at hundreds of projects, um, the industry would manage, better. The projects would get done on time and on budget more frequently. There would be less claims. These are all pain points that exist. I just knew that the analytical legwork that needed to happen couldn't be, it wasn't feasible to expect every single project in construction to hire a specialist that could do that, on an ongoing basis. But if you could solve that problem of getting the analytics done through a computer, you could actually put forth information, at different levels and across different sides of the contract in a meaningful way, such that better decisions would be made and less delays would happen, less claims would result, and more profit would be made. So that's what I did, is create that system that studies schedule data very thoroughly. And now we're moving into other data sets on top, because there was a method to my madness that I would study that first, and then it would start to answer questions about, where the problems were. I'd get into the correspondence and PM data to understand why they happened, and then I'd get into the cost data to understand, well, how much are we talking? So now we're starting to plug that data into the system as well.
Yeah, very cool. Did your first couple of customers come easy, or was it a grind?
Um, well, we started selling before the product was complete, and I was a consultant. So had to go from, manually doing things. I mean, I started a consulting business as a starting point to start this journey of getting to a technology. So
Uh,
I was bootstrapped and doing the same thing, but trying to sell a different service, a little bit more of a proactive service
yeah,
instead of a reactive service. So I had to come in at a lower rate to make it worth the while. Like, the cost that I was charging was not what I was charging at my consultants, because, you know,
yeah,
people are not willing to spend that much until they're in a lot of pain. But through that, I did a lot of, testing theories and coming up with, how would I build something to support this. We started building it, and then I started doing my analyses quicker, right? Getting involved, letting the computer do a lot of the legwork. Um, Once we got into customer discovery and product market fit, ultimately to get to a product that was a standalone, you know, it was, that period of time of trying to figure out what exactly the customer would pay for without the human. Was a learning process, but once we got through that process and had a a go to market plan with a standalone platform, yeah, we started selling it pretty well, because we had really touched on the pain points and really honed in on the companies that were ideal customer profile that would see the value quicker. So our first couple of years and up even up until now, it's been a good journey of bringing on new customers. Now, the one issue that I see these days is the amount of technology that's out there. We're not just we don't have a competitor really in terms of what we do, but we are competing for mind share and time, to be trying new technologies. That's for sure.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, change is tough, right? And unless you're going in the proactive, that was a very neat idea. Coming in a little bit less than your consulting. It sounds like you engineered sort of the manual, workflow through that consulting, and then I guess you digitize that as you went along.
Yeah, that's exactly what we needed to do. There was a period of time where what I thought the product needed to be able to do versus what the customer wanted it to do were two different things. Because I was using it for myself, right? And I was like going back to them and giving them the output. Um, so getting them to the user experience, the user interface piece was important to understand as well. And that did take a little bit more time because I had to remove myself from the world that I believed was right and get into the minds of them to the world that they believed was right if they were to have a product. But yeah, that was a 2 to 3 year period in and of itself.
Yeah, and at some point, I guess I think you raised some money as well.
Yeah, we've done the approach of raise as little as possible that you need for the next year, and then at the end of that year, raise as little as much as you need as possible to grow the way that you want to grow the next year. And eventually we got to a Series A. That was about a year and a half ago. And yeah, now we're, venture funded, and in growth mode.
Okay, very cool. All right. I mean, in terms of, because you have a team, the developers, all these things. Um, Coming from like the, consulting side, I mean, what were your strengths and weaknesses as an entrepreneur?
Um, well, I think my biggest strength as an entrepreneur is being able to understand how the business operates today, and where the issues are that impact other areas. I mean, as a consultant, that's what you do, right? You have to come in, you have to diagnose the problem, and then you have to come up with solutions to fix the problem. But you don't want to, you know, you can't. You have to be very surgical in identifying the areas that could move the needle in a positive way. So that was one big area that I, was naturally good at, was knowing how our organization works. Right, we've got a product, we've got a marketing team, we've got a business development team, we've got a sales team, and we got a customer success team. They all function as a system. That goes kind of back to my industrial engineering background. Was how does that system operate, and if you want to put something into it and get something out of it, how do you turn that into profit? How do you maximize and optimize? I was very good at that. I think what I'm learning is growing a business, hiring the right people, making sure that they have everything that they need, establishing a culture, appreciating the culture, but driving accountability, managing the actual people, was something that took some time for me to get, to know. Hiring leadership, understanding the balance between their autonomy and their accountability. I'm a natural problem solver, so I'll jump into a situation and I'll be like, okay, here's the issue, fix it. I'd fix it this way, right? And knowing where to kind of pull myself back, because sometimes when I say do this, I'm just saying here's what I would do, not saying do it this way. And sometimes they hear, we must do it Mike's way. And I'm trying to balance I want you to understand, I want to teach you how to identify problems and solve them. And I want you to, take your expertise, what you know about managing that process. And I want us to together, solve it. I don't want you to just think that when I come in and say do this, do that, or I would do this, I would do that, that means that's the way to fix it, because I'm at least humble enough to know that I'm not always right. So I'm learning a lot about those things, and it's been a good thing, that I didn't have much experience doing.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of that area, are you, working off, self-awareness and reflection? Are you reading books, mentors? Like, how are you approaching that area?
I do. I have a lot of mentors, advisors. People who have invested in our business. People who have been a part of growing businesses. People who are on our board. People who are board observers. I try to tap into every bit that I can to solve. To learn. My whole mantra is that I could always be better. But I don't want to have to figure it out, you know, on my own. I do read books. I do, when I have a challenge, maybe it's in marketing or maybe it's in customer management, I will find some information and learn about it. I will ask a lot of questions to people who may know about it. I will aggregate a lot of that information and to understand, what did I learn? What did this person say versus that person say versus this book? What seems to be, the solution that comes to mind for the problem that I have? So I try my best to, speed up the learning curve by not having to, figure it out myself. Chat GPT is a good thing too these days. I mean, I ask everybody here to get on that thing because it's so much quicker to learn.
Yeah, for sure. Looking back from what you've done, maybe it's career-wise, maybe it's the technology company. Is there anything that you would change or wish happened sooner?
Is there anything that I would change? Yeah. Um, I don't know if this is uh right or wrong, but my sense of urgency and trying to push that, like feeling like there's something that's just a grasp away. I always felt we were further along than we really were, man. You know what I mean? So thinking about, going back in time, I always thought, we were a bigger business with, a more successful business, a bigger name in the market. Or at least I was optimistic about the time that it would take to get to that next milestone, and not understanding truly what it's truly going to take to get to that next milestone and what that time would really be. I would say I had an over optimism bias of my own, that of how long things should take. And I've learned that every little issue isn't going to derail your business. You're going to always have challenges, and it's always going to take time. Um, and some of my forecasting was a little aggressive. I'll just say that. And then I'd come back and be like, "Man, I was a little too aggressive." And now that I've lived it, I understand what it really takes to get there. And that's something that I can't get answers from too many people. Yeah, I think we're naturally overly optimistic, or some people are, and I'm certainly one of them.
I think on average, entrepreneurs are very optimistic. Probably the fact that you have to deal with a lot of pain, so you need to be optimistic. If you knew how much pain some of this stuff was, maybe you wouldn't do it.
Right. I do look back at that. I do say, man, if I go back to that age, I guess I was I don't know, it was probably 10 years ago when I decided to, move from consulting into the technology, and how quickly I just did made that decision and thought it was going to be easy. I probably would have second guessed it if I knew what I knew now, but I'm really glad I didn't. there has been a lot of learnings along the way. But yeah, with that optimism, gave me the it gave me the confidence to take a step forward into this world, this unknown. And if I knew everything I knew now, I might not do that. I mean, I was having kids, during this time, and I have definitely learned what it takes, and it's always an uphill battle. But I'm very happy that I put myself through the ringer on this one because I've come out the other end a very experienced person who now knows what it takes to build a business from the ground up.
There you go. Well said. I appreciate the openness. Is there anything I haven't asked you, but you wanted to share?
Um, let's see. Uh, Not really. I think I do want to share that you know, we are on a mission. My mission is to make the construction industry better through the data that they already have access to. And the approach that we've taken is one of not trying to change the way in which things are done, but one of taking the processes that exist, extracting information, data from them, and using that to perform better. And it all drills down to, looking at performance, coming up with better decisions to improve performance, being able to look further out to potential problems, and come up with, you know, mitigation strategies and recovery strategies that actually work. With the common goal of optimizing the business of construction. A lot of people put us into this bucket of you're just another scheduling tool, but we're not. We don't we're not used to schedule projects. We're used to take the data you already have, and turn it into things that will help you make better decisions throughout the entire execution phase of construction. So those would be, I would just, as I get out there and try to message better. Messaging's a whole new ball game, also. But I would like the world to know what we do.